The luxury inmate dilemma. Why some prisoners refuse to leave Bastoy Island. Before we begin, subscribe if you think prison should punish criminals, because what happened on Bastoy Island made some people question everything they believed about justice. The siren screamed across the frozen shoreline just before dawn. Inside Cottage 17, an inmate named Victor Hagen lay face down on the wooden floor, blood crawling slowly beneath his cheek like spilled ink. One of the guards slammed the alarm button, while prisoners flooded the corridor in silence, watching through half-open doors. Nobody shouted. Nobody panicked. That was the first strange thing. In most prisons, a dead inmate meant chaos. Fights, lockdowns, revenge. But Bastoy Island wasn't most prisons. Sitting in the icy waters of the Oslo fjord, the prison looked more like a private Scandinavian village than a correctional facility. Red cottages, horse stables, pine forests, no concrete towers, no razor wire. The inmates cooked their own food, worked on farms, and even skied during winter. To outsiders, Bastoy was paradise. To the men trapped there, it was something else entirely. As guards sealed the docks and ordered a full lockdown, Elias Vinter stood near the cottage window, staring at the dead man being carried through the snow. Elias had spent 8 years surviving Europe's worst prisons before arriving on Bastoy 6 months earlier. He'd survived riots in Poland, gang wars in Belgium, and solitary confinement in Germany. Yet this island unsettled him more than any cage ever had, because nobody wanted to leave. That was a rumor whispered after lights out. Men approaching release dates suddenly sabotaged themselves. Failed drug tests, assaults, escape attempts that looked intentionally sloppy. Anything to extend their sentence on the island. At first, Elias thought it was obvious. Bastoy had warm beds, decent food, and freedom most inmates could only dream about. But then Victor started asking questions. Questions about inmates who disappeared before release. Questions about why certain guards controlled access to the ferry manifests. Questions about the old underground storage tunnels beneath the island. Tunnels that officially didn't exist. 3 nights ago, Victor had told Elias something in the laundry room that kept replaying in his mind. "This place isn't keeping men in," Victor whispered. "It's hiding something from getting out." The guards called Victor's death an overdose before the body was even cold. Nobody believed them, especially after Elias noticed the bruises around Victor's wrists. That evening, during lockdown, snow hammered the island while inmates sat silently inside the cottages. No television, no music, just the sound of the sea crashing against black rocks below the cliffs. Then the power went out. Darkness swallowed the prison instantly. A single emergency light flickered outside Elias's window, and through the snowstorm, he saw something impossible. Down near the restricted southern dock, guards were unloading another body from a ferry. But Victor's corpse was already in the infirmary, which meant someone else had arrived on Bastoy that night. Someone the prison never intended to register. The island stayed dark for nearly 20 minutes. Inside Cottage 17, inmates stood frozen beside the windows, watching flashlight beams cut through the snowstorm below. The southern dock was supposed to be abandoned, off limits even to guards without clearance. Yet 4 figures moved through the blizzard, carrying a stretcher wrapped in black plastic. Elias kept staring. When the guards slipped, the tarp shifted for half a second. The man underneath was alive. By morning, Bastoy returned to normal, as if nothing had happened. Breakfast was served at 7. Horses were fed. Snow was clear from the pathways between cottages. The official report claimed Victor Hagen died from fentanyl hidden inside imported coffee beans. Case closed. But the inmates weren't talking about Victor anymore. They were talking about Elias. Because after breakfast, a note appeared beneath his plate. "Stop asking questions about the dock." No signature. No handwriting. Typed, Elias burned the paper in the kitchen stove before guards could see it. But the message followed him the entire day. During woodcutting duty, inmates avoided eye contact. In the cafeteria, conversation stopped when he walked in. Even the older prisoners, men covered in gang tattoos and knife scars, suddenly acted nervous around him. Only one inmate finally spoke. Jonas Reed, British, former financial fraud specialist. 5 years into a 12-year sentence. And possibly the smartest man on the island. You noticed it too, didn't you? Jonas muttered while stacking firewood near the forest edge. Notice what? That nobody here fears prison anymore. Elias said nothing. Jonas leaned closer. They fear release. The wind hissed through the pine trees. Then Jonas revealed the truth nobody dared say aloud. Some inmates arriving on Bastoy were never meant to rejoin society. Wealthy criminals, corrupt politicians, informants, men connected to powerful organizations across Europe. Officially, Bastoy was a rehabilitation prison. Unofficially, it was a filtering station, a place where governments, corporations, and intelligence contacts quietly buried dangerous people without public trials or executions. They offered deals, Jonas whispered. Comfort, privacy, protection. Stay here quietly, and the outside world forgets you exist. And if someone refuses? Jonas looked toward the southern dock. That's where the tunnels come in. Before Elias could press further, a siren exploded across the yard. Guards sprinted toward the shoreline. An inmate had escaped. Or at least, that's what the loudspeakers claimed. The entire prison locked down within minutes. Armed boats circled the island while helicopters swept over the freezing water. From inside the cottage windows, inmates watched the search unfold in eerie silence. Nobody seemed surprised. Hours later, the escaped inmate returned voluntarily. No handcuffs, no injuries. Just pale, shaking, and unable to look anyone in the eye. That night, Elias cornered the man inside the laundry room. What did you see out there? The inmate's lips trembled violently. There's no way off this island, he whispered. Then he rolled up his sleeve. Fresh needle marks covered his arm. Before Elias could react, the laundry room door slammed open. 2 guards entered. And standing behind them was a man Elias had seen loaded from the ferry the previous night. Alive, wearing a prison uniform already stitched with a Bastoy inmate number. The man from the ferry smiled like he already knew Elias. His prison uniform was fresh, untouched by wear, but his eyes carried the exhaustion of someone who had seen too much. One of the guards ordered Elias back against the laundry machines while the newcomer calmly rolled down his sleeve, hiding a scar that stretched from his wrist to his elbow. Then Elias noticed a number stitched onto the uniform. Victor Hagen's inmate number. The room went silent. That's impossible, Elias said. The guards exchanged a glance, but the new prisoner answered first. Nothing disappears on Bastoy, he said quietly. Not even the dead. The guards escorted Elias to isolation before he could ask another question. The cell sat beneath the island near the old storage tunnels Victor once mentioned. Concrete walls buried under frozen earth, far below the peaceful cottages tourists photographed from helicopters. That was where Bastoy showed its real face. No fireplaces, no rehabilitation programs, no smiling guards discussing second chances. Just steel doors, leaking pipes, and screams echoing through darkness. Elias spent 2 days underground before Jonas appeared in the neighboring cell, bruised and bleeding from the mouth. They're moving people tonight, Jonas whispered through the vent. High-risk inmates, witnesses, political assets. They erase identities and recycle the records. Victor? Dead, but his number stays useful. The truth hit Elias harder than any prison beating. Bastoy wasn't rehabilitating criminals. It was laundering human beings. When certain inmates became inconvenient to governments, corporations, or organized crime networks, they were quietly transferred to the island. Some agreed to disappear forever in exchange for comfort and protection. Others resisted. Those inmates were drugged, isolated, and eventually replaced on paper by new arrivals carrying recycled identities. No graves, no records, just vanished men, wearing someone else's prison number. Hours later, alarms erupted across the underground corridor. A riot, real this time. Smoke flooded the tunnels while inmates overwhelmed guards using broken pipes and stolen tools. Cell doors crashed open one after another as years of buried fear exploded into violence. Elias and Jonas forced their way through the chaos toward the southern dock, while flames spread above the island cottages. For the first time in decades, Bastoy was losing control. But when they reached the shoreline, The truth waiting there was worse than either imagined. 3 ferries sat hidden in the fog, not prison ferries. Military. Dozens of armed men stepped onto the dock, wearing no insignias, no flags, no names. Behind them stood prison officials calmly handing over inmate files while helicopters thundered overhead. This operation had never belonged to Bastoy alone. Jonas stared in horror. "We were never prisoners," he muttered. "We were inventory." Gunshots erupted across the pier. Men scattered into the freezing water. Elias ran blindly through smoke and snow, a siren screamed behind him. Somewhere in the chaos, Jonas disappeared. Somewhere else, the island burned. And by sunrise, Bastoy prison officially reported a small electrical fire and an attempted inmate escape. No deaths, no investigation, no missing persons. Because the most dangerous prisons in the world aren't always the ones people fear entering. Sometimes they're the ones nobody is allowed to leave. And if this story unsettled you, imagine how many islands like Bastoy still exist beyond the fog.